Okay, so we're going to talk about two very important postures, yoga asanas. These are the basic backward bending and forward bending postures done on the ground. So we have paschimottanasana, the seated forward fold, and then bhujangasana, the cobra, the backward bend. There are a couple things that I want to mention about doing these postures, and I'm going to kind of walk through both of them and talk about that while we're practicing. So starting out, I recommend the using the woodblock timer to time the breath so that we can synchronize our breath with our posture training. With paschimottanasana, the first step is to make sure that the legs don't come apart. So if I need to bend my knees to do that and then flex the toes towards my face so that I can get this activation through my lower body, and then I'm using my entire lower body to move into the shape. This is far more optimal than just kind of folding over my legs and letting the inside of the legs fall apart like that, right? So if you see from this angle, the mound of the big toes is squeezing together the ankles, the inside of the knees, and the inside of the groins. And then I'm going to take my index fingers and bring them in between the big toe and the second toe and not pull. I'm not pulling with the hook of the index finger. I'm pushing down. So I'm pushing down. That's going to relax the shoulders. And I recommend having 5 breaths in and then out. Again, with the woodblock timer. So I'm inhaling and I'm exhaling. And I'm going to do that 5 times. So it's a vinyasa, right? Continuing to work the inside of the legs together, not letting them move apart, using the legs, using the feet, using the arches, pushing down with the index fingers. And after I've done 5, trying to get movement all the way from my coccyx up my spine. After 5, I allow myself to arrive in the shape, which I set up the asana by doing the vinyasa. It's really important. Doing the vinyasa with the breath rhythm. And then I'm going to maintain the posture for another 5 breaths using the same breath rhythm. Only now I'm not doing a vinyasa. But with each breath, there's going to be a subtle pulsation, a very small movement in and out with the inhale and the exhale. And I'm maintaining the posture. I'm maintaining the alignment inside the legs, the activation of the legs. I'm not thinking about stretching my hamstrings per se, but rather engaging the whole body as a single unit, which is where the vinyasa helps to set up. So we start with the 5 breaths in the vinyasa and then holding for 5 breaths. If we're doing that with a 6-second timer, right? The woodblock click on the Insight Timer app, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, right? 5 breaths will be 1 minute, and then I hold for 1 minute. And then I'm going to come out. I like to have a counter pose, which is either reverse tabletop, like that, or reverse plank, like that. And just take a couple breaths in the counter pose before rolling over onto the belly to prepare for cobra. And now I recommend actually practicing cobra to start, like to set up the shape, makarasana, the crocodile pose. So the elbows are wide, the toes are out, the heels are in, and the inside of the legs are on the ground. I'm going to start here, and stage 1 of makarasana is with the forehead on the ground. And basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the pressure from my pubic bone and my forehead to move into the ground, right? This is important because this helps to set up the alignment of the spine. The pressure here at the pubic bone is going to create length in the lower back. So let me just go ahead and take my shirt off so I can demonstrate. Now I want you to watch the lower back and the kidney area. Okay? So if I'm in Makarasana as a setup for Cobra, for Bhujangasana, then what I'm trying to do is create space in my lower back. So look at this movement here. Right? I'm moving my pubic bone into the ground, and I'm going to do that on the exhale. This will pull the ribs in. It'll draw the shoulders down. Now, if I can maintain that as I inhale and working the Uddiyana that we've been practicing, so pulling the navel back towards the spine as I inhale, all of a sudden there's going to be length in the spine, and the spine is going to want to lift. That's the cue to start to set up for Bhujangasana, the Cobra. So the hands come next to the ribs. I roll the inside of the thighs in, bring the tops of the feet down. And then I'm going to exhale, come down, forehead presses down, pubic bone presses down, space in the lower back. Inhale for 6 seconds to lift. Exhale for 6 seconds to lower. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did with paschimottanasana. Inhale up. Touch the limit, no force. Exhale down. Reset. Do that 5 times. The tip of the tongue is behind the 2 front teeth. This is called Jiva Bandha. But the tongue is not stiff. So I keep the tongue, the tip resting just behind the 2 front teeth, but the tongue is soft. Apologies for the construction sounds. I got workers here. We're building a temple. I'll have to show you. It's pretty cool. On the 5th breath of that vinyasa, I start to press, and I can rise on the inhale into a straight arm cobra. And if I did it right, then when I exhale and I keep my arms straight, I drop my chin, and now I have this pump action. The shoulders are away from the ears, pressing down through my elbows. There's the sensation of space in the lower back, but also extension up through the spine. So at the top of the inhale, I'm lifting the chin and I'm pulling the shoulders down, and I get all that space in the upper back. So those are the 2 postures that we're starting with, looking at paschimottanasana, the seated forward bend, bhujangasana, the cobra pose. So we have spinal flexion with the forward fold, which helps us access the parasympathetic nervous system. And then we have the spinal extension with bhujangasana, the cobra pose, which is the opening of the spine, the opening of the chest, putting pressure on the kidneys and the adrenal glands, the kind of the lower mid-back area, activating our sympathetic nervous system. We're going to look at these 2 postures over the coming weeks and look at a couple variations, things like how to incorporate the Makarasana, the crocodile pose before Bhujangasana, and looking at how the seated forward fold, right, paschimottanasana, and then the backward bend, Bhujangasana, these are like seed postures, right? They are, we can see elements of spinal extension or spinal flexion in almost any posture that we do, depending on what posture it is. And these are kind of like looking at families of postures. So this is why it's important to start here. These are basic fundamental shapes that we can work for a long time to receive a lot of benefits, opening up the whole spine, right, in the flexion and the extension positions, but also seeing how anything that we do from that will build on these foundational shapes. So those are the postures. That's how we're going to do them. And let me know if you have any questions about that. Peace. You know what? I forgot one thing that I want to add. Important piece of the puzzle is when we're doing the vinyasa. So let's say I'm doing a cobra vinyasa. I want to inhale and I want to rise the entire length of the inhale. So at the 6th second, I'm at the top, and then I start my exhale, and I want to lower for the entire duration of the 6 seconds. So I don't come down too fast and I don't go up too fast or too slow. It's like I'm lengthening the movement inside of the breath count. This is why we use the insight timer, because it keeps us accountable to a container of breath and a rhythm of breath, which we then can develop further and further and further, and maybe eventually increasing it to 7 seconds, a 7 count breath, or an 8 count breath, but we'll start with 6 seconds. So make sure that you have your Insight app coded for the 6 seconds. Okay, peace.